Getting quieter as you get older is one of those shifts that looks simple from the outside but runs much deeper than anyone ever stops to examine. It is not personality. It is not mood. It is one of the clearest signs of genuine wisdom developing in a person over years of experience. And the reasons behind it are far more specific than you might expect. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly what those reasons are and whether you recognize them in yourself. Let's get into it. The first reason. What actually deserves attention becomes much clearer. Time has a way of clarifying what actually matters. The older a person gets, the more clearly they can see the difference between what is genuinely worth their attention and what is simply noise competing for it. And that clarity changes everything about how they engage with the world around them. Not every opinion deserves a response. Not every conflict deserves engagement. Not every conversation that feels urgent actually is. And people who have lived long enough to learn that distinction stop spending energy on things that will not matter in a week, in a month, in a year. What gets said becomes more deliberate, more considered, more directly connected to something that actually deserves the words being spent on it. And everything else gets met with a quiet that used to feel uncomfortable, but now feels like exactly the right response. The selectivity is not coldness. It is not indifference. It is simply a clarity about where time and energy actually belong that only comes from having spent enough of both in the wrong places. And once that clarity arrives, it becomes one of the most consistent guides a person can have. The second reason. Observing starts to replace speaking. There is something that happens in a person who has spent years in rooms paying close attention to what is actually going on, rather than focusing on what they want to say next. They start to notice things, patterns in how people behave, gaps between what someone says and what they actually mean, the dynamics that shape a conversation before a single word is spoken. And none of that is available to someone who is too focused on speaking to observe. A room full of people talking tells you very little, but a room observed quietly tells you almost everything. The person who is speaking less is almost always the one who leaves with the most accurate picture of what actually happened. And once someone has experienced that clarity enough times, the pull toward observation over participation becomes very difficult to reverse. The quiet is not disengagement. It is attention of a different and considerably sharper kind. And the longer someone practices it, the more they realize that listening and watching carefully is almost always more valuable than anything they could have added to the conversation themselves. There's a confidence that comes from that realization, a quiet certainty that presence does not require participation. The third reason. Trying to convince people of things stops feeling worth it. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from years of trying to change minds that were never going to change, of making arguments that were heard but never really listened to, of investing energy into conversations where the conclusion was already decided before the first word was spoken. And after enough of those experiences, something quietly gives way. Not because caring stopped, but because something finally gets understood that takes years to fully absorb. That people believe what they are ready to believe. That no argument, however logical, however patient, however well constructed, will move someone who is not ready to be moved. And once that understanding truly settles in, the energy that used to go into convincing people gets redirected somewhere it can actually produce something. The conversations get shorter, the debates get fewer, the explanations stop being offered where they were never going to be received. And the quiet that replaces all of that is not resignation. It is one of the clearest signs of genuine wisdom that exists, because it takes real experience to stop spending energy on battles that were never actually winnable, and it takes even more to feel completely at peace with that decision. The fourth reason. Words start to carry a weight they never used to. Early in life, words come easily. There is not yet a full understanding of what they can cost, what a poorly timed comment can permanently change, what a moment of unfiltered honesty can do to something that took years to build. And so they come freely, without much consideration of where they land or what they leave behind. But something shifts after enough experience, after enough moments of watching words do damage that could not be undone, after enough conversations that ended something important, after enough times of saying something and immediately knowing it should have stayed unsaid. A natural cautiousness develops around what gets said and when, not out of fear, but out of a genuine understanding that words are not neutral. They land somewhere, they stay somewhere, and those who have lived long enough to feel that weight tend to use them considerably more carefully than they once did. Every word starts to feel like a choice rather than a reflex, and that shift alone is enough to make someone noticeably quieter than the person they used to be.
The fifth reason: silence becomes something to move toward rather than away from. Most people spend a significant portion of their life uncomfortable with quiet, in conversations, in rooms, in the spaces between interactions. There is an almost automatic impulse to fill silence with something, anything, because silence feels like a problem that needs solving, like something has gone wrong and words are required to fix it. But that discomfort fades with genuine maturity. Silence stops feeling like a gap and starts feeling like a space where nothing needs to happen and nobody needs to perform. And people who have reached that relationship with quiet stop feeling the pull to fill it. They can sit in a conversation without speaking and feel completely at ease. They can let a silence exist between two people without interpreting it as tension or failure. They can be in a room full of people and feel no pressure to insert themselves into every exchange. And that ease, that complete absence of the need to fill the quiet, is one of the most recognizable qualities of someone who has genuinely grown into themselves over time. It does not develop overnight, but once it arrives, it changes the entire experience of being in a room with other people. The quiet stops being something to manage and becomes something to simply inhabit. The sixth reason: not being understood by everyone stops mattering the way it once did. A significant amount of talking is driven by the need to be understood, to be seen correctly, to make sure the people around you have an accurate picture of who you are and what you mean. And when that picture feels incomplete or inaccurate, the instinct is to add more words, to explain further, to clarify until the version of you that exists in someone else's mind matches the one you know to be true. But at a certain point, that need loosens its grip, not because connection stops mattering, but because enough time has passed to understand that complete understanding between two people is rare, that some people will misread you, regardless of how carefully you explain yourself. That the energy spent chasing understanding from people who are not willing or able to offer it is energy that could go somewhere far more worthwhile.
If you found this helpful, like the video and subscribe to LifeBased for more insights about the patterns shaping your life and relationships. Thanks for watching.